32 ticks following. So they are swallowing. Monkey is swallowing. Snake self swallowing. Next, a swallow 2 will fly and come and swallow. You're ever swallow in a hollow gallow, making a whole lot of halabaloo. Jale kalu, we know say you chop the money some, so give me the loot. Do you really want a revolution or just your turn?
Welcome to Ake Arts and Book Festival 2020 online. My name is Amyn Bawa-Allah and I am hosting a book chat with Okechukwu Nzelu. He's the award-winning writer of The Private Joys of Nnenna Maloney. Hi, Oke, how are you?
Hi, I'm very well, thank you. How are you doing?
I'm good. I wish I was saying nice to meet you in person. It would have been epic because I am always wild at Ake Festival. Everybody knows that.
I wish I could be there in person as well. It's such a shame this year about the pandemic, but
I know.
Keep on going.
Sidebar, what have you been up to in this lockdown and the whole pandemic? How have you been finding joy?
Yeah, it's been a very strange few months, hasn't it? I've just been sort of doing what I can. I've been working on my second book, which has been a very interesting adventure, and that's been really fun and just some very different, keeping me very busy. And I've been reading, because we can't really see our friends and family as much. So I've been reading more, and I've been reading some things I've really enjoyed. So that's been good, and just trying to maintain some sense of normality, but what I can. How about you?
I've been good. I've tried different new things, but my current interest at the moment with my mom is snail farming. We have like over 300 snails.
300?
Yes. We built cages at the back of the house, and then they're like divided into 15 different places, and then we feed them, and they lay a lot of eggs, and I have been indulging myself in the reproductive activity of snails. There's a lot of orgies going on there, I tell you that. Okay. All right. I'm digressing. So before we go into the book chat, I'm a self-proclaimed member of the No Spoilers Association. So I will do my best to make sure this book chat is as spoiler-free as possible so that people can enjoy it as organically as possible. So we're going to start with you reading a bit from the book so that people can get just a little taste of what is coming for them when they pick it up. Yeah?
Yeah. So I'm going to read a bit from the novel, which is towards the beginning. It's no spoilers here. It's a section which illustrates the relationship between Nnenna and her mother, who's called Joni. And towards the beginning of the story, they have this really tender, close, warm relationship. But when Nnenna starts asking questions about her father and about her heritage and why she's never met him and what's going on with that sort of backstory, it becomes quite a strained relationship. But I'm going to give you a taste of when things are a bit more straightforward. Okay. So in this section, Nnenna has been working at a fast food shop part-time, just with a bit of spare cash, and her mum is picking her up after work. Just for context, the name of Nnenna's father is Morris. As Joni waited in the freezing cold car for Nnenna to come out of the takeaway, she replayed in her mind bits of her early relationship with Morris. Was she foolish? It had never been a joke to her, however wild it seemed now, for her to have had a child at 21. But the way things had turned out, she felt judged by her circumstances. She felt that her hopes, if not her entire self, had been made a joke of. Joni shook her head as if to clear her mind of a silly thought. She saw a figure walk quickly out of the takeaway and look around. Yes, it was Nnenna. Joni flashed her headlights and waved out of the window, and Nnenna trotted across the road. Nnenna had her music in her ears at full volume. It was the Smiths, and she congratulated herself once again on the aptness of the music. She had appropriated the Meet Is Murder album as the soundtrack to her life. This charming man was catchier, but her mother had said that she liked it. And she told herself, although not in so many words, that it was made for her. She listened to it on repeat, Sometimes when she was walking alone, she pretended she was in a gritty, low-budget movie about her life, and that the music was underscoring her every move, while an invisible audience watched, awestruck by her beauty and sheer significance, although these things were worn so lightly, so carelessly that you probably wouldn't notice them if someone hadn't made a film about her and underscored it with the Smiths. Joni quickly wound up the window and commanded her face to betray no reaction to the smell. Nnenna had worked at the takeaway part-time for most of the summer, and Joni was starting to get good at pretending. She held her facial expression fast and tried to busy herself with minutiae about the car and other things on her mind. Before, air fresheners used to hang in thick, accusatory bunches on the rearview mirror, while Joni made tiny, explosive comments about the smell and suggested that Nnenna's personal hygiene might be partly to blame. Joni tried to ignore it now. Even as autumn was rolling in, even when, as now, it was very cold, she wound down her windows as far as they would go, which varied according to the car's mood, until she saw Nnenna coming out of the building. She wound up the windows when Nnenna arrived because not to do so would hurt Nnenna's feelings, but she convinced herself that the smell wasn't as bad if she'd given the car a good airing first. For her part, Nnenna only plonked herself down on the back seat of the car and said thanks, with her earphones still in. For picking her up, Joni was never ever late, and for not wanting to hurt her feelings, which were always out in the open. Nnenna knew why the car was cold. Love can be such a tiny thing. Neither of them even noticed it as they sat silently in the car, smelling of unholy meats and vowing to have a wash, a really good scrub at home.
That's great. So, without like using full sentences or just like words or phrases, can you just take us through what was going on in your life when you worked on this novel?
Everything. Everything. Change, my 20s, self-knowledge, identity, teaching. I was training as a teacher, moving house, friendships, everything. I wrote this novel over about 7 or 8 years. So in that time, so much changed. And so when I changed, the novel changed, and I wrote different drafts, and I changed it so many times because I was changing, so I couldn't help it. And yeah, over 8 years, I got to where the novel is now. So it's been a big journey. Okay.
So what books were you reading during this 8-year period? Like what books do you think influenced the writing?
So I think there were books that I'd read before I started. So big ones would be White Teeth by Zadie Smith. That was a big one for me because I had never read anything before that which was so funny and which was also, it reflected a world I really recognised. Zadie Smith is writing about London, and I'm from Manchester, and I've grown up in Manchester. But that same sort of multicultural, vibrant life was something I'd never seen reflected in literature before. And I thought, this is a world I recognise. This is the world I want to write about. And that was a huge influence for me. And also, just a few years before reading that, I read Purple Hibiscus by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, obviously, it was such a big permission moment for me in terms of realizing that I could write about my Igbo heritage in any way I wanted to. I could write it in a way that reflected my experience or things that I've seen, and I could be creative, and I could be funny, and I could be all sorts of things, and do writing the way I wanted to. I think before I read that when I was about 16 or 17, I never realized that I could. And a few years later, I started to read all sorts of other things afterwards as well. And interestingly, though, Things Fall Apart was something, it's this massive canonical novel that everybody supposed to have read. I didn't read it until I was about 22. My dad put it in front of me when I was about 10 or 11 years old.
You read it in high school.
Oh, you read it in high school?
Yes.
Did you get it in high school?
Yeah, I liked it, but I don't think it made a lot of sense. I was just reading it so I could pass a class. So I should probably do the read of the book.
I think because I tried to read it when I was in high school. I would have been about 10, maybe 11, maybe younger than that, actually. I think younger than that. And I just I didn't get it. I couldn't figure out what it was doing. And then when I was much older, in my early 20s, I picked it up and I just raced through it because I thought, oh, I get it now. It's a funny thing. I teach literature to children, to teenagers now. But I think you do have to be careful and think carefully about what you give them at what age, because at some ages, maybe they're just not ready. They don't have the maturity to understand certain styles of writing and certain themes, But yeah, while I was, in that 8-year period, I read so many different things. I was reading Alan Hollinghurst. I was reading all sorts of things. Gosh, it's hard to even remember what I was reading at the time. All sorts of things. I love David Nichols was a big influence for me. His book One Day. I love books like that follow characters over a long period. I read A Little Life, which was I couldn't even finish it, actually. I don't know if you've read it.
I still haven't read it because everyone tells me I'm going to cry, and I'm always like, there's no book I've read that's going to make me kind of like, you're going to cry. So I'm waiting for like a time in my life, maybe November this year. I'll be like, okay, I'm just going to be sad. I'm going to read it.
Yeah, you're going to be sad. I'm telling you, I couldn't finish it. I had to put it down. Not because I didn't like it. It's beautifully written, but actually because it was making me sad in general life. Even when I wasn't reading it, I was like, oh, it's a sad book. So just be ready. It's a lot. But I just read all sorts of things, I guess, in that period, because after I studied English at university, I worked for a publisher for 3 years. I read a lot of poetry because that's what we published, and it was like a sort of a second education for me. I was able to, once I felt like I'd grown up and I could explore literature on my own terms in a way that I hadn't been able to do in the classroom before. So my 20s were a huge growing period for me, and I'm still growing.
So I want to get a little bit into the structure of the plot. I saw somewhere in a YouTube video that you said you drafted everything in your head first, like you did revisions, you were experimenting with the plot all in your head before putting it down. I mean, wow, like are you human? So my question is, how did you manage to do all of that, and why did you decide on this style of writing? Because there are different points of views and we're jumping through different time periods. Why did you choose to do that?
Yeah, so the first question, after university I had a very boring job, just doing admin in a law firm, bits of work experience, and see different bits of law, and I did a couple of internships as well while I was there. But most of the time I was just filing and photocopying, which meant that my brain wasn't very busy. So I just had a lot of brain space to do this kind of work. I had a lot of brain space to think about this story and the characters and what they were doing and where they were moving and things like that. So I could never do it now because I'm a teacher, I'm very, very busy, and I have so much more on my mind. But at the time, I had a lot of brain space, so that's how I managed to sort of plan things in my head, and I like doing that because it feels more organic. It's at least with the first draft, to think about things in my head. But now, once I finish that first draft, I need spreadsheets, think about how I'm going to tame this beast. And yeah, with the structure of the novel, I arrived at it over several drafts. I think I must have written 6 or 7 drafts before my editor even saw it. And with each draft, I changed something about the novel. So earlier on, I changed, I found my style, my voice, if you like, after sort of 2 or 3 drafts, and I changed the humor. And then after a draft or 2 more, I was like, oh, I know the structure that I want to tell this story in now. I know that I want to have these flashbacks to the relationship between Nnenna's parents and how they met and what their relationship was like and how they broke up and what happened to them in terms of why Nnenna never sees her father. I realized I wanted those flashbacks because I used them as a way to explain things about characters in the present. I think that we are all partly compounds of our pasts and of the pasts of people who are around us, who we love and who love us. As anybody will know, the older you get and the more you learn about your parents, the more you realize how they are human beings who have their own histories and have their own pasts. And I really wanted to build that into the story to make it feel more real.
I've always been fascinated with names in book titles. Yes, because I've noticed from also other readers that when you read a book that has a name title, sometimes you fall in love with them or you want to strangle them, like Queen or Patsy. And when you don't get that strong emotional reaction from that kind of book, sometimes you just shelf the book into like, it was okay. It's almost like you had this expectation and you did not meet up to it.
Yeah.
And know that it's a heavy load for an entire novel to carry. But I think you did a fantastic job of making Nnenna shine without making the other characters like just stay in the background. So I'm curious about your process. What came first? Nnenna, the character, or the story you wanted to tell?
That's a good question. I originally, when I thought of this story, 10 years ago now, before I even wrote a word down, it was very, very different from what it is now. When I was originally thinking of it, I thought I wanted to write a story about a group of teenagers, Nnenna and her friends. I thought this was, I thought it was going to be a focus on sort of that part of life and growing up and being sort of 17, 18. And then as I was thinking more about it, I started to flesh out bits about Nnenna's life and where she came from and who her parents were. And as I just got a bit older, I realized that's the kind of story that I wanted to tell, that I really wanted to write about family rather than necessarily a friendship group by itself. I'm really passionate about that. I think family is so formative for good or ill. I think that it explains so much about people. I think in a lot of ways, people are most themselves around family a lot of the time. And I just settled on it and I thought, this is what I want to tell. So I sort of went from who Nnenna was to what she did in a way. I thought of her dynamic with her mom first, and then I decided, as I fleshed out why they are that way and what relationship they have and their histories, then that story sort of built from there, if that makes sense. I thought I want to tell this story of Nnenna and her single mom, and also because I had a single mom when I was about just a bit younger than Nnenna. I was raised by a single mom myself, and I wanted to
single mom too.
Right. It's so you'll know it changes changes the family structure and the way that you grow up and the way that you relate to each other. They have the responsibility shift. Joni, it's only Joni that can pick up Nnenna. There's nobody else to help her out. She has to do that for herself. And similarly, Nnenna and her mom take turns to cook because there's only the two of them. And so it just shifts things big and small in the way that they relate to each other. And I really wanted to write about that.
But why choose a teenage girl point of view? Why not from Joni's point of view, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, hopefully I've shown a bit of both. Number one, I thought I want to write something which is sort of a stretch of the imagination. I'd always wondered, what it would have been like if I'd had a sister or if I had been female. How would my life have been different? How would my experience of family and things have been different? And similarly, I have two brothers, older and younger, whereas Nnenna is an only child. So all the sort of the family structure decisions that I came to were me trying to challenge myself to write convincingly in fiction. I really didn't want to write something that was too closely autobiographical. Just always been curious about other people's lives. I always say that I am a feminist, and it's really through having that single mom experience that I think really is important to me for how I started to think about feminism and how it affects people economically as well as emotionally and other things. So I really wanted to step outside of myself, and I had to for this structure of the novel because it's about how people of different experiences relate to each other and connect to each other. So I found myself writing one person's story through writing many people's stories.
Yeah. So in this part, Nigeria, Yeah, Nigeria as well, or Africa actually. When people name children, it always has like some special meaning that they want that meaning to follow the child throughout life. Johnny gave a reason for naming Nena her name, but what was your specific reason for choosing that name, Nena?
Yeah, I this so as I so this novel went through so many different drafts. In an earlier draft, I
Was there
wanted
another name?
not another name, but another story. The story of Nena's name played a bigger role in an earlier draft, because
Okay.
about how Nena relates, because it means obviously the name Nena means, I think, your father's mother in
Yeah.
Igbo. And so in an earlier draft, there was a different relationship between Nena and her father. But as I changed it and the story sort of shifted through different drafts, I thought I still really like that name, and the rhythm of it and the feel of it just sounds right. I can't really explain it. I think it's maybe what parents are thinking when they name their child. They're thinking of, yes, the meaning of the name, but also, does this name seem to fit with this person that I've got in front
Yeah.
of me now? Yeah, in a way, Nena's name is a sort of a vestige of an earlier draft. But I think there's also a sort of a nice resonance there in terms of the very close relationship that she has with her father in certain ways that exclude Joni.
Yeah.
Joni, and that's why Joni's very afraid of Nena finding her father and
Leaving
connecting.
her.
Yeah, because she thinks, well, if you find him, that'll be it for me. I don't have that connection that the two of you have in terms of your heritage. I'm just the person who's been here looking after you and caring for you, and you can't see the depth of that and the value of that because you're only 17. And if you leave, that's it. So hopefully there's still a resonance of that makes sense.
Okay. So, congratulations on all the recognition the Private Joseph Nina Maloney has been receiving. I personally think the reason why it has been getting so much recognition is because your writing just has a way of resonating with anyone. Because after I read this book, I gave it to my mom and she was like, "Oh, okay, this is nice. Did you give it to me because it's like a single mom?" I was like, "No, it's just a nice book." The relationship between Nina and her mom, my goodness. Were you conscious of the dynamic you were that you wanted to depict, or was it more free flowing? Because it's so multi-layered, the relationship between a white mom and a biracial child. Like how did you do it?
Yeah, it was something that definitely built up over drafts. I will hold up my hand and say that my first drafts of pretty much anything I write are always pretty bad. So but I just carry on working on something until I'm happy with it. I always say I think my work ethic is probably stronger than my talent, but I have a really good work ethic, and so there we go. But yeah, I always knew the dynamic that I wanted to create. Partly from things I'd seen and partly from things I'd experienced. So as I say, my mom's a single mom, so I knew that from personal experience. I knew what that was like. But of course, Joni is white and Nena's half Igbo. She's half Nigerian, so that adds another layer to it. And that was from things I'd seen and experienced and read, but often just from things I'd intuited. My cousins have a similar sort of ethnic makeup, but they know both their parents, so their life is very different, and they have two fantastic parents. I remember when I was planning this book, I was thinking, right, I'm going to research, I'm going to do lots of reading, I want to find out about this kind of aspect of single motherhood and this aspect of being biracial and this aspect of, the female experience. And I was reading the articles and I was doing the research and I was sitting in the library and making notes. And it's not that I didn't learn anything, because I really did, but I was doing all this research and I thought, this is not going to make the book better if I carry on in this way, because it felt sterile. I felt like I was treating women and biracial people and white women as though they were these sort of alien creatures that I'd never encountered, when actually I'd grown up around people whose lives were very similar to everybody that I write about. So I thought, just write it and be empathetic and use what you know and treat them like human beings. And hopefully that's what I've done. because I thought if I carry on with this very formal, starchy research sort of, it's not going to feel the way I want it to.
Yeah.
You know?
Okay. Also, I think your dialogue game is like on point because the conversations, I'm like, wow, even between Nina and her mom, like this is deep. Like I the conversations were just nice. And especially between Steph, her best friend, when they were talking about sex, I was like, yo, I can actually remember this conversation. So because of Nina and her friends and their other friends, this book almost felt YA-ish, but it wasn't really YA-ish. Did you have a specific audience in mind when you were writing?
Yeah, I always imagined it as an audience of people who were old enough to be able to reflect back on their childhood and teenage years with a bit of wisdom and a bit of experience. This is a book with a teenager at its heart, but it's not really a book specifically for teenagers. I never imagined it as specifically for teenagers. I thought you'll get the most out of this if you can look back on being that age and think, I remember what it was like to feel that way and be in that position and want those things. And although it's weird now that I teach high school and I teach children of Nnenna's age, and some of my students have read that book, which is terrifying. It's very strange, but lovely because they want to make that effort.
Is that what you drew inspiration from, writing from a teenage point of view, like your experience with teaching high schoolers or your own experience as an adolescent?
I think it was more my own experience that fueled, but I think I can't see how. I think because especially the sense of humor that teenagers have, which that kind of mischievous, cheeky sense of humor. It had to find its way into the story, the way they talk to each other and the way they talk to and think of adults. There's a bit where Nnenna has a lot of sort of anxiety dreams or daydreams, and the bits when she's thinking about her teacher, and she's imagining her teacher sort of having like one hug a year, and they spend their days collecting like VHS videotapes and stuff like that. Like that stuff that I laughingly think that maybe my students think about me. Like, I don't go home, I don't have a life, I just plug myself in under the desk every day and then just like turn myself on in the morning and flip the switch. And I think it's just quite funny to kind of flip that perspective in that way.
Since you're a teacher, it would be crazy not to ask you for tips. What would you say would be like the number one thing to remember for writers when creating dialogue?
Number one thing to remember, I would say, try and make it sound as though it could be said in real life. I don't think everything needs to be realistic as such. I'm actually teaching Lorraine Hansberry's A Raisin in the Sun to my sixth form group at the moment, which I'm really loving. And one of the things that she says is she's very passionate about a specific type of realism, which is not just has it happened, but could it happen? So, and I think that's really important for dialogue, especially because the things that you're writing, nobody has ever actually necessarily said. The conversations that you're creating aren't necessarily verbatim conversations that have happened. You're writing stuff that could have happened, and sometimes you're going to want to make that lyrical and moving and profound in ways that people don't necessarily get to on their own in real life. So it's important to tread that line and say the words aloud and think, can I imagine somebody saying these words? Not have somebody said them, but can I imagine these words being said? That would be what I remind myself of anyway.
Religion is a thread that runs through this novel, from Morris, Nina's father, grappling with his faith, to Jonathan, even Joni, and Nnenna uses Bible quotes to write in her journal. Can you talk a little bit about why religion was such an important aspect of this novel?
Yeah, I'm really glad you picked up on that. It was a hugely important aspect of my life. Until I was about Nnenna's age, I was I really did believe in God very devoutly, and I took my faith very seriously, and I went to church and I read the Bible, and I really believed in heaven and hell and redemption and sin and all of those things. And even after I left the church and stopped believing and lost my faith, it was still a really powerful part of how I see the world. And it still is. I still think of things in terms of redemption and forgiveness, and I still carry a lot of those values with me. And I think the Bible, as much as I don't believe it to be literally true in any way, I still, for me, there are parts of the Bible which are still so beautiful to read and so moving. The Book of Job, especially, which is something that Morris encounters in the prologue to the book. That struggle to understand God and the universe and right and wrong and fair and unfair. That's a hugely important part. So it had to form a part of the novel for me. And also because it's a part of life for a lot of Nigerians, whether you live in Nigeria or not. I think it's a part of life. It was a really interesting way for me to figure out, a really interesting vehicle for Morris, Nnenna's father, to connect and disconnect really with his English counterparts that he met through the church, because they see religion differently. He's had this experience which I had when I went to Nigeria as a child, and saw my granddad have prayers every morning, and this very routine, close relationship with scripture, which the others have come to in a slightly different way. And I wanted to reflect that because it felt like home, really.
Sometimes when you read a book and there's a line you want to highlight or post on Goodreads, I've always believed that those words or phrases or sentences did not come easy to the writer. So what I want to do is I'm going to read 3 of the lines that resonated with me, and you just let me know what was going through your head when you were at that particular point, if you can remember.
Yeah, okay, let's go. The test.
Okay. All right. So this is from page 58.
Mm-hmm.
To be close to someone in so much distress is to be distressed yourself.
I remember writing that, and I just, with a lot of these lines, I guess this is going to sound weird, but sometimes when I'm talking about like a bit of advice for writers, I talk about sometimes being in a kind of trance, which sounds maybe a bit weirder than it is. So working yourself into a state where you are so sensitive to ideas and to emotions that creativity comes a bit more easily. And everybody does that in different ways. I like to encounter some sort of art that really moves me, and often it's not writing. For me, if I'm having trouble with writer's block or connecting with an emotion or trying to figure out how I want to express a specific experience, I'll see a film that I think is fantastic and really lights a fire under me, or I'll look at a painting or read a poem. Often it's not like a novel that I will read that will help me give ideas. And I think that was what was going on there. I was in that kind of trance state of trying to express the closeness of that kind of sadness or panic with somebody who you're trying to help, but that frustration when you can't quite get there. So yeah, I've explained that.
I've shared that on Goodreads and Twitter and everywhere. This is from page 109, when Nnenna sees a dress in the window display. A dress could usher in the dawn of a new era.
I remember that was one of the most fun bits to write, because I was trying to use my own experience as a child, as a boy, but to empathize and understand Nnenna, because I identify as male. I've never identified as female. But I think certain things are universal in that materialism affects everybody, and the way that we talk about material things, often we invest them with such power beyond what they really have, especially when we're young. I remember being young and thinking, this pair of trainers change your life, and it's gonna be a new era, and everything is gonna be golden, and there's gonna walk on air once you've got the pair of trainers. Like, we like to separate genders so much and say men always do this, women are so far away from that, and they're never the same. But I don't think that's always true. I think often these things are really universal. It's really funny sometimes people, one or two people who've read the book have been like, did a woman write that bit for you? No, like, and I think it's weird that we should even ask those questions because we're not living on separate planets. You know, we all share so many experiences. So yeah, that was actually really, really fun for me to write. It was
Okay. The last one, this is Morris talking here, page 241. We are not supposed to say we hate it here. Immigrants, Nigerians, we're not supposed to say that we hate it here. Where did that come from?
yeah. So in my 20s, I experienced working life in a way that I hadn't obviously previously. And I experienced racism in the workplace. That was, that period of my life was really important for me, not just in terms of writing the novel, but in terms of the way I think about the world, and about myself, and I'd experienced that kind of frustration. And I wrote Morris as this young man who's under an immense amount of pressure from all sides. He's got his faith to live up to, he's got his parents, but he's also in a country where he's trying to make his way, and it's actually very hostile to him as a black man. People assume that he doesn't read, people assume he's stupid, and life is just very difficult for him in a way that he's never had to experience before in Nigeria. And that part of it was personal. I know what it's like to be in an environment that doesn't give you your dues, and that makes life so hard for you and still expects you to be grateful. And I really wanted to portray that because it's so central to what happens with Morris and Joni and Nnenna, that Morris is under these impossible pressures that he doesn't really have the tools to deal with and shouldn't have to.
Cool. Well, thank you for putting all of that into context for me.
Yeah.
So there are so many lovely characters in this novel, but my absolute fave was Jonathan. Oh my God. So he's so intriguing, yeah, but his storyline was a little bit harassing. He provided comic relief,
Yeah.
but I felt like there was more that could have come out. Is there some time in the future that you might go into details about Jonathan's life? A short story, maybe a novella, something.
Do you know? Never say never. I've got no plans to at the moment because I really like the way that Jonathan's story got tied up. But what I will say is that my second novel is much more focused around black men, some straight, some gay. And although Jonathan's character doesn't make an appearance in that novel because it's not a sequel, it is much more focused on that type of experience than the first one. So hopefully if you liked Jonathan's character, there'll be something for you in the second book.
Yay! Okay, awesome. So we have come to my second favorite part of this chat, and this is where we'll get to know more about you as a reader, writer type of way. Okay, so you said when you read Chimamanda's Purple Hibiscus, you felt like you had been given permission, and you've also spoken about Zadie Smith. Aside those two, what other writers have influenced your writing life generally? Because I read somewhere that you do read a lot of classics.
Yeah, I do, and I try to. I think because my education was, my university education especially, but also my high school education was very white British. Much of the stuff that I've read outside of that has been my own, just off my own bat. So I love people like Jane Austen. I think she's really funny. I love Charles Dickens. I love the classics in that sense. But I guess more contemporary wise, closer to the present, I love Flora and Whapper, which is Chibundu Onuzo. I love The Spider King's Daughter. I thought that was a fantastic story. Wale Soyinka's Death of the King's Horseman, this incredibly powerful play. And yeah, I guess the other big name would be Arundhati Roy, who's got a Small Things I've just love. I did my dissertation on her at university. And I just love her approach to life and writing. You know, she doesn't just write fiction. She's written these incredibly beautiful speeches and polemics and essays on politics and the world and globalization. And she's so articulate and so compelling, and so passionate about life. You know, fiction is how fiction for her is never an end in itself. It's about how she achieves a bigger thing, about how she changes the world and how she shows people's lives and hearts. I just think that's so powerful. So
nice. So who would you consider your literary godparents? If you could pick just two.
I think I'd have to say Chinua Achebe, because of the way, even though his style is very, very different from mine.
Yeah.
His style is very, very different from mine, but I always love the humanity in his books, the way that he presents people who make giant mistakes, and he doesn't shy away from that. You know, he doesn't try to underplay the gravity of the mistakes that people make, or the way that those mistakes affect their lives or the lives of the people around them. But he comments on it in a way that is human and compassionate and so wise and knowing. And I've always wanted to be able to achieve that. So maybe one day.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed.
So what's the first book you remember loving as a child?
I think that would be a book called I Capture the Castle by Dodie Smith. I'm sure I would have read other things before then.
And how old were you then?
I would have been about 12, maybe 13.
Okay.
And if anybody doesn't know it, it's Dodie Smith also wrote 101 Dalmatians. So he has the range. It's a really funny, wise, lovely story about two young women, well, a family that lives in a castle. Their dad is a writer, but he's a really unsuccessful writer, and he's not written anything for ages. They don't have any furniture in the house. They've got no food. They've got nothing because their dad just hasn't written anything and hasn't made any money. And then two Americans move in next door, and things start to happen. And it's about growing up and falling in love and knowing yourself and family. And it's really, really good.
If you could pick any writer to write your biography, who would you choose?
Ooh, that's a good question. I've never thought about that before. If I could pick any writer to write my biography, I would choose... That's so good. That's such a good question. I'd want somebody who is like wise, and somebody who could give like the whole, like who understands like a huge breadth of human nature. Maybe somebody like Britt Bennett.
Okay.
Britt Bennett, I loved her, well, both of her novels, The Mothers and The Vanishing Half.
I love The Mothers. I still haven't read The Vanishing Half.
Oh, it's even better, honestly. It's one of the I read it during lockdown. It was one of the only good things about lockdown.
Okay.
It's brilliant, honestly. I was so sad when it ended. It's so beautiful. And she just understands human nature really, really well. It's anybody who hasn't read it, it's a novel about two sisters in America who are black but white enough to pass as white. So they and one of them lives life as a black woman, one of them lives life as a white woman, and it follows them and their sort of lives. It's brilliant. It's really, really good. And she's just so sensitive and knowing and agile. And I think I'd choose her.
Nice. Okay. I would like to read that. So if you could choose a career aside writing or teaching, irrespective of talent or like qualifications, what would you choose?
I think about this all the time. I love my jobs, but I do think about this all the time. And I think I'd be split between acting, which I loved doing at school, university.
Oh, okay.
Or yeah, I loved acting. I loved being in farces and things. I was in a couple of farces at university, and those really inspired this book as well. Actually, those really inspired the sense of humor and the way that things come together in a disastrous but kind of serendipitous way. Or maybe I'd be a songwriter. I'd love to be.
Hmm.
I'd love to have that kind of behind the scenes sort of job. Yeah.
Okay, that's nice. Um, so yeah, this is taking us back to the book. Have you seen any review online that you did not like how they spoke about the private years of Maloney? Have you gone to Goodreads?
So I try and stay away from Goodreads because I think that reviewing is a difficult thing to do. And Goodreads can be useful for me as a reader, but I think as a writer, I try and stay away from it. It's not really for writers. I think it's for readers, and
Yes.
it and so I think that there are some reviews on there that are great, but there are some that are just a bit. They're very short and don't necessarily tell you in any depth what somebody thought. In terms of reviews online, to be honest, most of the reviews have been lovely. But there was one review which was mostly really nice, but it said like one or two things that I just thought, oh, I just don't think you've read it. I just don't think you've understood read this properly. I know the novel is not perfect, but it was really frustrating where somebody had just fundamentally misunderstood something. And that's frustrating, but I think that's just part of the job, that's just, you just have to accept that, reviews don't always work the way you wish that they would. That's just part of it.
Speaking of reviews on Goodreads, if you ever get bored, I think you should check out the reviews of the Bible on Goodreads. It's a laugh, I promise.
What kind of things do people say?
Oh my goodness. There are some are like, oh, this book doesn't make any sense. There's plot, it's all over the place. And there's some are like, do not recommend this because it's just about like one character, and then they said he's going to do something and he doesn't do it's. People are wild.
Yeah.
Okay.
Even worse than that is I think Google's taken it off now, but Google used to let people review continents, so you could review like Asia.
Oh,
yeah.
Oh, wow.
So there are people on there giving like Asia like 3 stars. Like,
I saw a review of Mount Everest recently. Someone was like, the facilities are terrible, and he doesn't recommend, you could die. And I'm like, okay, well, duh.
I mean, I hope that some of these are jokes, but I love the idea that somebody could be just so entitled that they just go online and think, no, I didn't like that place, you shouldn't go there. Like,
Yeah. Okay. So what book might people be surprised to find on your bookshelf?
What book might people be surprised to find on my bookshelf? Crazy Rich Asians, maybe. It's on my digital bookshelf because I got the ebook. I love ebooks, but Crazy Rich Asians by Kevin Kwan. I loved it. I loved every minute of it. I raced through it. I thought it was hilarious and so much fun. But
Have you
it's
seen
very
the movie?
the kind of novel I'm writing, and I have seen the movie and I loved the movie. Have you?
I have.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I haven't read the book yet.
The book is
I saw the movie and I'm like, yes, I'm going to get the book, and I have it on Kindle, but I still haven't started. I recently received his latest one, Sex and Vanity. I didn't enjoy it as much because the book said sex and vanity, and the fact that sex was the first word, I didn't get. There wasn't a lot of sex. It was more vanity, and I was like, okay, if the book was vanity and sex, I'd be like, yeah, it's a nice book, but it was sex and vanity. So I was like, I feel very let down as it. But yeah.
Oh, okay. I'll have to try and see if I can get a copy of that.
What book do you think is most underrated?
I guess The Charioteer by Mary Reynolds was really good. I don't know if it's underrated exactly. I don't know how many people know of it. Do you know of The Charioteer?
I don't know of it. Nope.
It's this story of two men who fall in love during the war. in England, and one of them is a conscientious objector, one of them is home, having been injured in the war, and they fall in love. It's beautiful. And another one I think would be Women Are Different by Flora and Wapper. It gives a side of it. Well, first of all, it's the kind of story that I love anyway, for the same reason that I love The Little Life by Hana Yanagihara, because it follows people from childhood to life, which I think is such a fantastic, fascinating thing to do, because people change so much over that time. And it follows lots of different women in a way that, certainly if you grew up in the conservative kind of Nigerian household that I grew up in, you would think that things just never happen. And they do. People live all sorts of lives, and people are unfaithful, and they make mistakes, and they make wrong turns in life, and they meet the wrong person, and they find out all sorts of things. And I loved it because I think it just tells stories that you don't necessarily know are out there to tell if you've grown up like I did. So I think Women Are Different would be one I think more people should read.
Okay, cool. So before you decided that you were going to write a novel, did you have writing goals somewhere? Have you smashed them? Do they keep changing?
Yeah, I think they do. To be honest, when I first started writing, I wrote because it just seemed like the natural thing to do. I liked telling stories. I did it because it was fun. And as I've grown up and I've read more and I've thought more, it's still fun. I still really enjoy doing it. But it's also tremendously difficult as well. And what gets me through that is what I want to be able to achieve through what I'm writing. I want to be able to make people feel less alone. It sounds corny and ambitious, but it's true. I think fiction has that really wonderful power to make people feel like they're not alone, or less alone than they might have thought they were. And certainly with my second book now, I want to give people a vocabulary for understanding themselves and for understanding certain experiences in life. To refer again to Adichie, Half of the Yellow Sun really opened up a conversation about the Biafran War that people really didn't feel comfortable having. And I think that really showed the power of writing to help people talk and to understand themselves and their history. And I want to be able to do that. I want to be able to write things that really help people along in life in small ways. So,
what writing craft do you think you're really good at?
So what writing skill do I think I'm good at? Okay.
Don't mention the dialogue, because I already hyped you on that one.
I think maybe humor. Yeah, I think comedy. I'm not going to pretend I find it easy, because I don't. But I do find it fun, and I think that, I think I can write a funny scene. So
yes, there was a lot of that. I loved how even the scenes that shouldn't be funny, it was sensitive, and you laughed and like, sometimes in life you have to find the funny moments, and you really did that well in this book.
Thank you so much.
So, what book have you not finished yet? Like, you left it halfway, or you started and just, you mentioned The Little Life.
Yeah. Okay. It's beautiful, and I always feel a bit torn when talking about recommending it or not, because it's beautiful, it's so well written, but it just made me so sad. So I couldn't carry on.
Are there genres you avoid in your reading?
Yeah, I don't read very much historical fiction at all, so I should probably read more of that. And I think I need to read more. I haven't read much science fiction. I want to be the kind of person who reads a bit of everything. But I tend to read just the things that are closer to the genre that I want to write in. So I tend to just not read that much outside of it. So I should read more widely in that respect, I think.
Okay. So since you want to read historical fiction, I have a recommendation for you.
Okay.
The Shadow King by Maza Mejiste.
I just bought that.
Oh my God, you should.
Yes.
Oh wow. And then when we're done right now, you should just look at the first sentence of
Okay.
that book. I read it and I was like, whoa, what is going on? Wow, how is she doing? Yeah, I took a moment after the first sentence. Yeah.
That's big praise. Do you remember what the first sentence was?
I can't remember it because I cannot say it word for word, and you have to read it. It was something about memory. Yes.
Ooh,
But yeah,
okay. Brilliant. I can't
yeah.
wait to start that.
What was the last book you recently enjoyed?
That was Edinburgh by Alexander Chee, which
Oh,
is
okay. I haven't read that.
brilliant. Oh, it's so good. Oh, it's so good. It's honestly one of the best books I've ever read.
Oh,
It's
wow. What is it about?
so it's very sad, but it's shorter.
You like sad books.
Do you know, I really don't. I really don't like sad books. I normally avoid them. I love comedy, I love comedy, but and this is not that. I normally avoid sad books, but this one, it's shorter than A Little Life, so it was easier for me to bear.
Oh, okay.
And it's also it's not as cruel as A Little Life. In A Little Life, like just when things are going well, then something horrible. This is different. It's a sad book. It's about what happens to a young boy when he is abused by his choir master as a child, and the guilt he feels because he didn't tell his friend that it was going to happen to him as well. And then we follow him through life, and we jump ahead a bit, and we see how his life is affected by this. And I won't spoil it, but the prose is just so beautifully written. Every sentence is just so expertly crafted and so moving, and the imagery is fantastic and it's masterful. It's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant.
Nice. Okay. I'm going to add that to my TBR like ASAP. Before we wrap up, what projects do you have lined up? I know your sophomore is coming out in 2022.
Yeah. That's
Okay.
really exciting. It's so obviously it's a work in progress, so I can't say too much about it yet, but it is loosely inspired by the Book of Ruth in the Bible. But it's, as I said, it's about black men, so Nigerian men or Nigerian British men, one gay, one straight. And it's about two people who aren't necessarily officially related, who don't necessarily officially have a connection, but choose to look after each other and help each other as best they can. I think we need that kind of thing, maybe now more than ever. So I'm really excited about that. And yeah, I'm editing it now. I can't wait.
Any scripts? Still teaching?
I'm not working on any scripts, no, but I do have an idea for a play I've been thinking about for a long time.
Oh.
So, maybe after this second book is written and I've got a bit more time, I'll get to that.
Do you have any favorite Nigerian food?
Yeah, I do. I think it would have to be egusi soup.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. What about you?
Oh, I like food, so I like everything. I like egusi soup, vegetable soup, afang. I love all the soups. There's not much I don't like.
Yes.
Fortunately, it's not. I can't show that to anyone, but we thank God for good genes. Okay. So I can't wait to read your new book because it was a joy reading The Private Joys of Nnenna Maloney. So I'm encouraging everyone out there right now to go get yourself a copy of The Private Joys of Nnenna Maloney by Okechukwu Nzelu. It's a trip. It will be available at the Ake Festival bookshop. The link will be available to you. So yeah, it was fun talking to you and
Thank you.
lovely to meet you. You are
Thank you so much. So lovely to meet you too.
Okay. All right.
If you ever need a new place to go, you can join me in a world of words. Many seems like I'm nowhere to be found. If you look, you'll find me in a book. Let's take a ride to the past in the back of a phoenix. Let's float around the moon. alone, now you know where to look. Find me, find you, find the word in the book. Never be alone, now you know where to look. Find me, find you, find the word in the book.
Stranger's Guide is not a typical American travel magazine. Our mission is to dive deep into a single location, commissioning work from great writers and photographers, famous individuals, as well as up-and-coming new voices. This year, we decided to go to Lagos. And we are proud of the volume we produced, with original work from some of Nigeria's best writers and photographers, working with luminaries like Wale Soyinka, Molara Wood, and Femi Kuti. We think this is a very special volume, and we're so excited to bring it back to Lagos.
Sticky, spicy, sweet.
I want to go there. Don't touch me.
I will get you arrested. Very, very easy. Relax, everybody.
He shot you.
That 5 minutes madness only you can understand. Visit myspectre.com to get your Spectre experience. Spectre, loans in 5 minutes.